going to talk a little bit about question 3. Let's get into the next one. This is a long one, so bear with me as I read a little bit. But Portland, along with other cities across the nation, is experiencing a rise in houselessness driven by the lack of affordable housing. The ongoing COVID pandemic has economically wrecked entire communities, devastated households, and a significant and continued lack of access to mental health services, including healthcare-centered substance use disorder treatment. Despite credible research showing that police sweeps of houseless encampments don't solve houselessness and fail to lead to effective housing solutions, city resources continue to support this harmful practice. So my question to you is, how will you prevent the displacement of houseless communities and elevate real solutions that result in vulnerable Portlanders finding and maintaining housing?
Yeah, this is one of the crises of our lifetimes here in Portland, and we've experienced so many things. And the pandemic really was a stress test of all of our systems, and we are failing in those systems. And some of those system failures are not things that just happened in the last, 2 election cycles. This is chronic, decades of disinvestment in our communities, not in housing in particular, not just locally we get left holding the bag, but by federal and state disinvestment over time. And that's happening everywhere across the country. So we are not alone in that. It's particularly hit our city hard. And right now we need to look at real solutions. And I will just be saying emphatically, some of my opponents think that Band-Aids and quick fixes and shortcuts are going to solve homelessness. Tent bans do not solve homelessness. Arresting people out of homelessness does not work. And also shortcuts and quick fixes, of congregate shelters, those are old school tactics for homelessness. Those are not going to work. We know what works. It's just putting in the hard work to build the system of shelter to services to housing. And that's just what we need to do. And so, I know that some people are trying to give people quick answers. So, because everybody is feeling the urgency of need, and we're seeing poverty on our streets and in crisis in real time, and it makes people uncomfortable. It should make us uncomfortable. We should not normalize this. This is not normal. And so until we actually fix at the root causes of the system, we should not be doing anything that further displaces people. Tent bans just move people from one location to another location, or under a bridge, or in another doorway. These are things that we're trying to move in unsafe areas. We're trying to move away from that. So the real hard work is just rolling up our sleeves and creating that system. So it's more temporary alternative shelters, like with services on site. There's been a study that shows now that we are actually having success with that model. The small homes with privacy, a place for pets and a place for possessions, showing that respect for people as they make that transition, and then also making sure that we have good and sufficient mental health services and addiction treatment services that are ready and right there. No waiting in line. No telling somebody, oh, here's an appointment, come back next week or in a month. Come on. We need to make sure that other end of the system is holding up their promise to the community. And that's really at the state and the county level. And I'm going to press our county friends on that. They need to get that stuff together and get it going, right? So that we can do our part too. And then the third thing is there will always be a segment of our community that is going to need permanent supportive housing. And we just need to accept that that is what we have to do to take care of our most vulnerable. So investing continuously in permanent supportive housing will ensure that we have people who are ready to finally receive housing after their treatment and supports and wraparound services, that they stay housed. Otherwise, they're repeating this cycle of being back on the street, and that's not helpful to them in their lives, and it's not answering, the crisis before us. So it's not rocket science. We know what we need to do. We just need to invest in these systems and expand it. Yeah.
Thank you so much for that. There's so much in there. I appreciate hearing in particular that jailing folks won't automatically get them out. It shouldn't be rocket science, but Well, as we're filming, just for the folks listening and watching, we're filming in Old Town Portland, which is usually like the media space to focus in on. And I've seen folks that I talk with every day who are devastated by having their possessions taken away from them. I'm seeing wheelchairs being taken away constantly and things that they need, like birth certificates and things that are getting destroyed and lost. And I also appreciate and would love to dive a little bit deeper about how to work with the county and other spaces who hold a big, large part of it. Hearing and reading from credible news sources that folks are dying in jail due to not getting the support that they need. Personally, I once saw a video of a healthcare provider and police officer arguing back and forth about what to do. In the meantime, someone passed away. As they were trying to move them to the shelter. It broke my heart, and we need real solutions and not these quick, like you said, Band-Aid fixes. Can you tell us a little bit about some of what that partnership looks like? I know we have the joint, Office of Houseless Services, but I also know that sometimes from the outside, it looks like it's just like I don't know, it feels like a game of tennis. Or like ping pong. We're just trying to figure out who to place blame on. And what does it look like to work in partnership?
Yeah, I think what I know is what it looks like to work in partnership is actually having active conversation, checking in before assumptions are made. Clearly there are going to be times where we're going to disagree on strategy. That's normal. That is politics. But we can always find agreement around a value, or at least that's what we should be trying to do. We should be trying to set some high goals and high values that are foundational to what we're trying to do. And I think that has been missing from the conversation until more recently. And I would also say that there is finger pointing and there is bomb throwing sometimes. I don't like that kind of performative politics. I do think there is a time for accountability, for sure. I also know that you can't always bring in your hammer unless I know I want to trust that you tried to pick up the phone and talk to me first, or that I tried to call you first. And I think those things drives wedges between what might otherwise be a more productive alliance or alignment around a common goal. So we need leaders who know how to work with people, who can pick up the phone and work alongside on some of these tough issues, but also hold each other accountable when one of us is not doing our end. And also we need to have some grace to allow us to pivot when we need to get it done. And we shouldn't be afraid to try new things. Just because it's the way that we've always done it, whether it's the city or the county, then we're not doing our jobs. It's our jobs to try and find new solutions. It's our job to try and stretch each other and be responsive to the moment. So in that way, I see that there's opportunity. And despite what people might see right now, I do think there's the majority of the county and the majority of the city who do want to find that alignment, even though it might look like it at a high level. Yeah.
Thank you for that. I know the folks in our membership, we talk a lot about this like political theater that we feel like sometimes it's a distraction from what we actually need to be focused on. And it's real people's lives, and it shouldn't be used in this way. So thank you for bringing that in. There's a second part to my question that I would love to talk a little bit about. Not only is sweeps very devastating and traumatic for folks, like you mentioned, it's not effective. It's also expensive. Do you have any plans or ideas of how you would maybe reallocate that money to something else?
Well, I think for me, as a commissioner who only oversees a certain part of the city, I don't have enough information on all the things yet. So what I want to do as soon as I get in there is really to have the ability, and it will feel amazing, trust me, to finally have access to all parts of information and to do the big look across the enterprise. I don't have that as one commissioner over a small, discrete set of bureaus, right? Or not small, they're not small bureaus, but over a discrete set of bureaus right now. So I think looking at the big picture is important. Also looking at those upstream things. If we can get ahead of housing, longer term, we can get ahead of housing. If we can spur more housing production, if we can do more things to reduce the time it takes to build and the cost to build, and provide incentives to build more affordable housing, my hope is that we would reduce the need for houselessness. We would reduce the need to do anything like sweeps or cleans or so, that people wouldn't be impacted that way. I do believe that there is some promise in the ability to have more of these temporary alternative kinds of shelter, because they provide more dignity to people, they provide more privacy to people. And if we can couple that with services, on-site services, and actual on-the-ground caseworkers or street outreach folks. And I was talking to Shannon Singleton the other day, and she said that they used to have them and they haven't had them, and we need to bring them back. I believe with those combination of things, we'll see more people taking up services, and they won't have to be camping on the street. So I'm hopeful for that time, and that's where my intention is, and I'm hoping to see if we can work in partnership with the county to get there.
Yeah, thank you so much for that vision. I have another question just related to housing a little bit. I know there's been some different thoughts from maybe opponents or even folks running for city council around the fact that maybe we can't do more in terms of building housing. I don't know. I don't necessarily agree with that, but they're like, we've done all we can. I know. And then, well, I think there's something more to talk about in terms of there are going to be folks who need affordable housing as well. But also, what does it look like to stabilize the folks who are currently in housing? I think a lot about some of the folks that we serve within the Black community who are constantly being pushed out of neighborhood after neighborhood. They're not able to stay, even with some of the caps that we have, can't afford to live in Portland anymore. And sometimes they try to stretch out and stay into because they want to be close to community.
Yeah.
And then sometimes they have to leave Oregon completely because they can't find somewhere to stay. And sometimes they have to end up on the street. So I'm curious, knowing that I think we talk a lot about the housing bureaus and things when it comes to houselessness, but think about economic development too, and thinking about raising the price. So just thinking about Prosper Portland and what role they could take in this. Would love to hear just your thoughts about it.
Yeah, I believe that Prosper Portland definitely had a challenging charge because it had a history of really, decimating neighborhoods and leaving people behind. And so in this Portland of today, they wanted to do things differently, and they're doing things actively differently. They're investing in our communities differently and more. But I also think it's also a time to also maybe recalibrate again up. And so this is the perfect time to do it. We're going to have a new council. We're going to have a new mayor. We have 2 new TIF districts on deck to start. I should say two regional areas of TIF districts in East Portland and also downtown Portland again. So what lessons have we learned, and how are we going to apply them differently? And I think that was the premise from the beginning. And so there was a very intentional committees put together to really grapple with these issues, and they've come out with some proposed ideas of boundaries, et cetera. But it is all going to be about the implementation, and it's all going to be about who is at the table to make sure that we're investing in the right things and we're doing it the right way, and that it's exactly going to be community driven, and by community, actual community, not folks that have different kinds of interests that happen to be identified as community for convenience, right? So we have another opportunity to see if we as a city can get it right. I feel like it's a big test for us. So that's going to be the proof for us in that regard. But I also think that as a city, we have to stop just pinning or expecting Prosper to be the end-all be-all for ECDEV. It is a development agency. That is it was literally the name, right? And I'm glad it's rebranded. But I feel like we need a broader strategy also around ECDEV that touches multiple bureaus, not just Prosper Portland, which actually has its own board, but how can we create an economic development priority across the city enterprise that's working in concert with Prosper Portland. So I'm interested in really building out more ECDEV capacity in the city side properly. And so I don't know how I'll do it yet, but I like the concept, and I feel it's a natural evolution of where we need to be. to meet the Portland needs of today. And that includes work with small businesses, micro enterprise, entrepreneurs. I mean, the Pitch Black and the Pitch Latino work is incredible. How do we scale things up? How do we, create more ancillary programs out of some of that work? I mean, we are a city of makers and entrepreneurs and creatives. We need to elevate that more and bring that prosperity back into community. So I think there's opportunity, but first and foremost, lessons learned. We have to look at like what didn't work and make sure we never repeat those lessons again. I will point also to the promise of Albina Vision Trust and what that brings. It's a whole new model for how community self-determination intersects with support from their local municipality and also state and federal government. And they are bringing millions and billions of dollars into this region that we would not have had otherwise. That is a game changer for Portland. And I hope that electeds and people who are used to being at the table sit up and take notice, because that is investment, that is city transformation. It's like catalytic for Portland. So in that way, I think we have things to learn from ABT.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for bringing them into the room. Shout out to Winta and the crew. They're quite amazing. And for folks who may not know, if I'm not mistaken, the mayor gets to appoint the board for the Prosper Portland. So quite a lot of power and opportunity there. I'll circle back on that I'll circle back to that in a little bit. But you mentioned TIF district, and for folks who may not know, tax increment financing. We call it urban renewal on the streets, so to speak. It's triggering for a lot of folks. And I know you put together a group of folks, particularly quite a lot of African Americans, many of them who have been harmed directly by the work of Prosper Portland when they were Portland Development Commission in North and Northeast Portland. And it's hard and it's triggering, and it's also, to be frank, it's kind of scary. I know Prosper Portland current executive director just put in her leave to go to Port of Portland, and I know just with all the changes, yes. There's a lot at stake for this election to see yes. what it looks like, and it is my hope that I'll just share in this moment that the Prosper Portland board reflects our community a little bit more. Right now, it doesn't look like the community that I see and I spend time with around this great city. And I do hope, I'll say as a plug, I hope we open it up at the state level to be able to use the funds for some of that vision you mentioned. It's hard to only use it in a certain way when yes. when there's so many amazing things that it could generate that can keep people in place, so to speak, and help the business owners. So thank you for that.
TIF funds?
Yeah, TIF funds.
Oh yeah, I wish we could use it in more ways too. I agree.
Yeah, hopefully we'll get some fun lobbying power maybe at the city and Prosper Portland to help kind of lead on what that looks like at the state level. And then again, hopefully we'll get a board that reflects us. Before I move on, I want to see if there's anything else you want to share a little bit about maybe some plans or thoughts around how do we make sure we don't currently continue to displace the houseless community, and also thinking about the folks who are really vulnerable, who are close to that edge, and they're one paycheck away, one health emergency away from having to live on the streets or living in their cars or with friends and family. Anything else you want to say before we move on?
Just one last thing. There's so many things to say, but one last thing I want to make sure that not to overlook is the role of housing. And I know you mentioned that someone who might have been here before mentioned there's not much more we can do. I vehemently disagree with that. Housing directly plays a role in our resulting homeless crisis, and whether we have the tools to make it rare and brief, or if we're going to continue to perpetuate the poverty that we see on the street. And I believe that we do need housing along the continuum, but of course, primarily affordable and now middle income housing, because we do have those families that are the working poor or the working people that are at the margin and one or two paychecks away. That's how I grew up. And it's a very real fear, and it carries physiological implications that are multi-generational, primarily on BIPOC communities and low-income communities. And we need to get out of that cycle because we're dying younger, we have more health problems, and we live in parts of the city that are more impacted by environmental, you name it. And so, but I know you all know that, but I think we need to do everything we can to catalyze more housing development in those areas that we talked about. We do have enough land in this city to build more housing. Housing is expensive to build, yes, and we cannot control market forces right now. So what can the city do ourselves? Like, what is within our jurisdiction to do? There's still a lot we can do. We can look at how we reframe regulation and revisit old regulations that no longer help us, or that actually create a more expensive, project. It takes longer, and that, for an affordable housing provider, that's not actually helping. While well-intended at some point, some of these policies, we really have to do the cost-benefit analysis. And I'm not saying just dollars. I'm also saying the time, that it takes. We're losing time that we need, and that time could be better spent with a shorter process, get the housing up and going, and have people access it. So cutting through that red tape, what are some ways that we can do that? What are some ways that we can reduce the permitting time so that people don't dread, having to go through the permitting process to get something built in the city? How do we also change the incorrect narrative that Portland is not a place to invest in, and that Portland is not a place to that is not safe, right? How do we change that narrative so that people are investing and wanting to build here again? So there are multiple things to do, but we have to do them all in concert, and it takes leadership to hold that vision and drive all these multiple ways together to create the conditions where we can do those things. So we do need more housing. We need 120,000 more units over the next 20 years. So we need to get to work like now.
Yes. Thank you so much for bringing that in. And for folks watching and listening, we're talking about Reimagine Public Safety. We're here with Commissioner Rubio. Thank you so much for being here and sharing your vision for the city.